We, the indigenous people, have historically struggled for individual and collective respect, for our culture, identity, language, right to health, education, and to promote development according to our needs. Since 1994, the United Nations General Assembly has designated August 9 as the International Day of Indigenous Peoples, with the aim of protecting our people who have suffered from constant marginalization and discrimination. Guatemala is one of the countries in Latin America with the greatest social inequality. It has a population of almost 18 million people. Its natural and economic health is concentrated in a few families with the greatest capital, who own the means of production and the land. These families have historically played a very important role in the political and social arenas of the country and are responsible for the inequality, millions of poor, malnourished children, illiteracy, poverty, corruption, and drug trafficking. And as a result of lack of opportunities, thousands of Guatemalans have had to leave the country in search of a better way of life. According to the Census 2018, the indigenous population represents 43.6% of the Guatemalan population, although it is a known fact that strategies have been implemented to deliberately decrease the percentage. We continue to be the most excluded and neglected population in society. We have endured different kinds of plunder throughout history, from the so-called Spanish conquest, the expropriation of land, the extraction of natural wealth to genocides. In Guatemala, we have 23 indigenous people who speak our own language: Cachiqueles, Pocomchies, Tutuhiles, Pocomames, Chortillas, Uspanteco, Sipacanpenses, Chincas, Quiches, Mames, Chu, Acatecos, Ahuatecos, Mayamopan and Itza, Zacapultecos, Chalchitecos, Quichies, Canjuhabales, Ishiles, Jacaltecos, Achies, Tectiqueco, and Garifuna. The existence of the new virus COVID-19 has shown in a very concrete way how our people have always been abandoned by the politicians. Their actions make it very clear that their only and most important interest is the economy, like mistaken decisions such as opening the country at the highest peak of infection. Many of the companies that for years have shown great accumulation of capital did not even assume the crisis in a responsible manner, and instead, as an act to distract attention, opted to declare bankruptcy in order to lower salaries or lay off workers. The government has found in COVID-19 the perfect apparatus to manage millions of loans under the pretext of building hospitals and improving the existing ones. Almost 5 months after announcing the first positive case, and with more than 50,000 positive cases and more than 2,000 people dead, the health system has collapsed, showing that very little money from these loans have actually been used. We regret the death of health personnel throughout the pandemic who have not received adequate equipment for the care of patients with COVID-19. They do not have cleaning supplies and medicines to treat patients, and we stand in solidarity with the families of these people who have given their lives to care for the unprotected population. The people's demand for opening and using the facilities of the military hospital has been ignored. Militarization has increased, using fascist methods to impose curfews at very complex hours for the population who have not been able to stay at home due to the maintenance of the household economy. In the municipalities of Nawala, Santa Catarina, Ixtahuacan, and Santa Lucia, Utatlan, in the department of Solola, 120 kilometers from the capital, they imposed a state of siege for 30 days. This means a suspension of constitutional guarantees such as freedom of movement, prohibition of meetings or demonstrations, and any citizen may be detained and interrogated without a warrant. The government has promoted alleged social projects to support the neediest families, using criteria that are unattainable for families suffering from extreme poverty. The basic sanitary recommendation of washing hands to avoid the spread of COVID-19 is impossible, since most indigenous communities do not have potable water. Written prevention information is not disseminated in all Mayan languages. In Guatemala, many of the regions speak their own indigenous language and do not speak Spanish. One of the most questionable measures has been the closure of the country without previous warning. in which our peasant brothers were totally affected by not being able to transport their crops to the markets. However, the company trucks like Coca-Cola and the National Brewery are circulating normally. For most of us indigenous people, COVID-19 is just another pandemic. Our problem has existed even before the crisis. Many of us have to walk for hours to reach a health center where they do not have the necessary medicines or equipment. And most of the time, they are the cause of many of the deaths from curable diseases. We, the indigenous people, demand respect for our ancestral cultures. For years, we have demanded respect for Mother Earth, promoting good living through the consumption of organic and not canned food. We have maintained a direct struggle with the devourers of the earth. In recent days, the government ratified the month-long state of prevention in the municipalities of Estor Morales and Livingston, in the Department of Izabal, as Decree 13-2020, which affects the municipalities of Pansos, Santa Catalina, La Tinta in Alta Verapaz, where mining activity exists. It is incredible that in the midst of a health crisis, evictions are being promoted in the communities of El Esfuerzo II, Plan Grande, Buena Vista in Estorizabal, in Dos Fuentes, and Purulha, Baja Verapaz. The government decides to close the Secretary of Agrarian Affairs, the Presidential Commission on Human Rights, and the Secretary of Peace, which were created as mandates of the peace agreement, which we strongly condemn. In view of everything mentioned today, on the International Day of Indigenous Peoples, the organizations Molo Xochiltepec, Asociación de Desarrollo Integral San Huyub, Colectivo Cumbre de San Nicolás, Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation, IPMSDL, Guatemala, and as members of the International League for the People of Struggle, ILPS, we are launching the campaign Health and Beans for the People, an action that will allow us to support 500 families from organized communities in this economic and social crisis with the delivery of essential medicines and basic foods such as beans, corn, and rice to prevent the spread of COVID-19. We will continue to strengthen the organizations and unite the struggles to resist the crisis of this pandemic and the consequences it will leave us in the future. Long live the indigenous people of Guatemala and the world.